Alright, so hey everybody, I'm Jessie, and I'm here to talk to you about alcohol, and more so the evolution of it. Now, alcohol has been around for quite some time, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a little bit of the history of it. I'm going to take you through some of the problems with it, and some ways to be safe with it. So, let's start off with, in the beginning, alcohol was used as a drug in the 16th century because water at the time was not safe to drink. And so the alcohol they had was mixed with like bitters, and it was basically just tea. And so it actually aided the immune system more than it did any harm to people. So they were using it generally as just a medication. And by the time the 18th century rolled around, the British Parliament had passed a law to encourage the use of grain to create distilled spirits. And rum became the first spirit to be mass-produced within Great Britain. And they were giving the Navy soldiers a daily ration of rum. And then things got a little bit worse when people started creating cheap gin. And it created quite the wreck because by the middle of the 18th century, over 18 million gallons of gin had been consumed. And this was the first case of widespread alcoholism, not to mention just pandemonium in the streets. And at this time, you also have to remember, there were no drinking laws, such as, children couldn't have it, so the whole population was intoxicated. And it was a mess. So, now, this image here is depicted, it's called Gin Lane, and it is by William Hogarth, who was a painter back in that time, and apparently decided that he should let everyone know that's what life was like back then when everyone was wasted. So, alright, so now some of the effects of alcohol. Now, to understand why alcohol created such widespread mayhem, it's important to understand what makes some alcohol, such as gin, such as rum, more potent and more dangerous to consume large amounts of than things such as beer and such as wine. Not that I condone drinking large amounts of beer either. Now, alcohol is classed as a depressant, and that's everything. If it's alcohol, it's classified as a depressant drug. And the side effects from the heavy consumption of alcohol include slurred speech, unsteadiness, altered perceptions, and slower reaction times. This is something that causes a lot of traffic accidents, that causes people to fall down stairs, have just general accidents when they're under the influence of alcohol. However, in small amounts, alcohol can act as a stimulant rather than a depressant. And most people drink for this effect. Having a glass of beer or, a glass of wine, and they're pretty fine. They feel a little more relaxed, they feel more comfortable in the environment they're in, and they're just ready to go. They're having a good time. Except, problems with alcohol occur when people have too much. This is when they lose control. This is when they think they can do things that they can't. And the reason that is the alcohol numbs your body to such a point that you do start to lose the sensation of pain. Your body will reject the alcohol from its toxicity, and it will cause you to vomit and get rid of it to get it out of your system that much quicker, because the body cannot process how much alcohol is in your system at the rate you're putting it in there. And after that is unconsciousness. This is where you pass out, or in very severe cases of alcohol poisoning, you drop into a coma, and if you've gone completely too far, you die. So hopefully none of us experience that. And all of these things are caused by severe toxic overdose, which is when the chemicals that enter your liver from the alcohol have it completely overloaded that it can no longer filter it. Alright, so what is in alcohol that causes these effects? So ethyl alcohol, or ethanol, is the only form of alcohol that is used to make beverages. And and it is usually made through the process of fermentation or distillery. And fermenting is a chemical process where yeast gets mixed with fruits or grains, and when those chemicals get together, it basically just sits there and hangs out until it creates alcohol. So, for fermented drinks like beer and wine, they contain far less alcohol content than drinks made in distilleries. And so then I created a little chart here, and the usual content for various alcohols, 2 to 8% is your beers and your ciders. 8% to 20% is most wines. And then you start getting a little harder with liqueurs. You can get some that, they're just nice, they go down smooth, you have a good time, and, you're going to be fine in the morning. And then you get into your harder stuff, tequila, rum, brandy, gin, whiskey, and vodka. Everyone's had some good times with vodka. Alright, so as alcohol became more popular, governments decided that they should really try and get a handle on it. And with people drinking, more and more, they were beginning to see more of that pandemonium when, just shit was going down. And they decided that alcohol needed to be banned. So, in about 1919, America started the prohibition. You were not allowed to sell, store, or transport alcohol. Some people, when this was coming about, decided to buy as much alcohol as they could and stash it, which I guess in a sense is different than storing. So, they found those loopholes, and while the alcohol could not be sold and was banned for that, consumption of it for a medical reason was still legal. So a lot of people were finding, what they called a good doctor and getting prescriptions to have their alcohol. So, in a way, it's kind of the same way we have marijuana now. And so, yeah, the citizens were looking for doctors that would prescribe them alcohol or buying cases of it before the law was passed and stashing it away in their cellars, in their basements, putting it in different jars, what have you, just to have it. Now, at this time, an underground market came about. One of the most widely known people in this market, and one of the people who profited the most from it, was Al Capone. And he was one of these many men who was really an entrepreneur, who decided to take something that was hurting the country and make it great. And he did some things that weren't that great, but all in all, creating your own business is pretty hard to do. So, speakeasies became a thing. And now, obviously, without being able to buy alcohol, these were hard to supply. So, they had to find a way to fill the demand. And they were hiring men to smuggle rum in from the Caribbean or hijack whiskey trucks and bring them from Canada. Sometimes they would even go up into the mountains and get their stock from homemade stills. So we've got various pictures there of, looks like a lumber truck, but they're actually bringing in bottles and just mass amounts of liquor coming in. Then, around 1933, the government was facing a stock market crash, and they were facing kind of the middle of the dirty 30s, and they realized they had to do something that was going to create jobs for the people, and they had to create something that they could get taxes from again. They needed that money. They decided re-legalization of alcohol was their best option. And this was one of the first times that a government constitution was challenged. And they had already changed it from what it originally was to make the new law, and then ended up changing it again because they screwed up. So, this was a super good time for the American government. And then we seen the role of alcohol change in society. At the end of the Prohibition, alcohol returned to just being a social drink, and when people had it taken away, they realized that it was more of a novelty than just something they should be drinking all the time. So this is when it became at your fancy dinner parties, at weddings, things like that, that people would drink, rather than just having it all day. In 2012, 87% of people ages 18 and older said they drank alcohol at some point in their life. And 71% reported they had drank in the past year. And with 56% saying they had had a drink in the past month. Now, these seem fairly normal rates, and we didn't seem to be in too much of a problem, because if you're thinking, those seem like high percentages, you also have to realize this is a global census. It wasn't just, Canada that we're all that wasted. And most people will identify as a social drinker, which is consuming alcohol without getting to the point of being drunk. This is beers after work with your buddies, and things like that. Alright. Now, one of the darker sides of alcohol is alcoholism. And even though most people identify as social drinkers, there are a few that have crossed into the dark territory of alcoholism. And what alcoholism is the addiction to consuming alcohol or the mental illness and compulsive behavior resulting from alcohol dependency. In a study conducted by CBS News of the 25 drunkest countries, Latvia was number 25 with 3.30 gallons per person being consumed. Ireland was 15 with 3.81 gallons, and Moldova in first place, drinking 4.81 gallons per person. So that's quite a bit of alcohol in those countries. And some of the facts on it: alcohol is the most commonly used addictive substance in the U.S., with 17.6 million, or at least 1 in every 12 adults suffering from alcohol abuse or alcohol dependence. And there are several million more who engage in risky drinking behaviors that could lead them to problems later on. Alcoholism is a chronic and progressive disease that includes problems controlling one's drinking. In my personal opinion, as someone who does drink and as someone who has experienced severe alcoholism in my family, I don't believe that alcohol should be banned. But I do believe that awareness needs to be out there. People need to know the effects of alcohol, and they need to know how to help their family members or their friends who might be sliding down that slope into alcoholism. Personally, I have seen good nights with alcohol, and I have seen some extremely bad ones. I've had family members go through both of those two extremes as well. And the proper awareness for how to handle those people and for even how to help yourself is something everyone should look into. Alcohol has been a taboo for a long time, and that needs to be broken. It should be everyone's choice whether or not they choose to drink and how much they choose to drink. And so for those of you who might drink, who do drink, or who have decided to try, always remember, drink responsibly.